Gee, woo. Thursday morning at 8:30, it's going to be a challenge, but won't be the hardest thing. Anyway, welcome to Anatomy and Physiology 1. This is the class where we focus on the nervous system, muscle anatomy, some physiology, and then the endocrine anatomy and physiology. So some of you have had the other anatomy and physiology course, the MP2, and so you know a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in this introduction to the course. Maybe if there's time at the end, I'll step out of the room, and those of you who know me from AMP2 and know the structure of the course can maybe reveal some of your knowledge to the rest of the class. We'll see if there's time. The overall structure is that in this room, we will have, lecture and clicker-based discussions. We will not do TBL the way we did in CellPhys. It will be more traditional. By that I mean the best way to get the most out of this early morning hour is to have done the reading before class and identified the things that you feel strong and the things that you feel less strong about, to then listen to the conversation, the lecture and the conversation that happens in this room, making sure that the things that you were unclear about from the reading get clarified, and ask a question if you're still unclear. Make sure you ask a question. I have a lecture prepared, but I teach better when I'm responding in a sort of more conversational way to a question. I do better, you do better. So don't hesitate. Of course you're going to hesitate, but overcome your hesitation to asking questions, because it helps you, it helps me, and it helps everybody in the room. And I'll try to repeat that occasionally over the course of this semester. So in this room, a fairly traditional class. Lecturing, clickers, conversation, etc. In lab, we will do the anatomy lab. So, let me be more linear here. Let's go through the syllabus. So I ask you, like everybody does, to please read the syllabus, because I work pretty carefully to make sure that it has the key information. Some of the things are, standard, like the course grading. Look and see, where do your points come from? About half of the course grades are on formal exams. There'll be 3 section exams and 1 final exam, and those account for about half of the course grading. And then there's some quizzes and some problem sets and lab participation all contribute to the grade. So, keep track of where the points are, where the value is in terms of the grade. But also keep track of the learning goals, right? What are you here for? You're here to learn and then to do the best you can on all of these assessments. So exams will be in class, closed book, of course. Quizzes will be not in class, but closed book. So in a quiz setting, what you'll do when the quizzes are going to be due on Sunday nights at 11:30 p.m. But they will be available from about Thursday, at 10 o'clock in the morning until that Sunday. So what you'll do is you'll go to the CST desk, you'll get the AMP quiz, it'll be there available for you. You'll take it and sit down somewhere out here and take the quiz. I'm structuring quizzes to take about a half an hour. Could be less depending on how well prepared you are. The quizzes are closed book, and so I'm trusting you. You're taking it here. I'm trusting you to keep your books closed, to keep your phone off, to keep your smartwatch in your bag. That's the idea. There's a lot of trust here that when you take the quiz, you're going to leave your notes, your books, your electronics somewhere else. Because if the electronics are sitting there right at your foot, and you're trying to remember, I know the name of that structure, I know the name of it, I just can't remember it right now, and you look it up, that's cheating. So don't do that. Quizzes, though, are closed book, but you take them when you can, at your convenience. The deadlines are on the schedule. The problem sets, the homework, are open book, open notes, open friends, open internet. You can do them with your friends. You have to submit your own answers. You can't plagiarize, but you can work together. Okay, and then in the syllabus there's some learning goals, which I hope you'll read and incorporate into your worldview. Some tips for success, some of my ideas for how to do well in this course. Let's talk about the required texts. There are 2 required texts, the physiology book and the anatomy book. The anatomy book, so the physiology book is, they'll be reading assignments. Again, I suggest that you read before class and then use it as a reference when you're studying. A copy of the book is on reserve here at the CST desk. It's the same book as used for AMP2, so if you take AMP2, you'll just hold on to it because you'll be using it again. If you don't plan to take AMP2, I think the resale value of these books is pretty good, so it's treated like an investment. I know it's super expensive, right? It's over $100 new, but you can get a lot of that back if you resell it. The coloring book is where we will learn anatomy, and so coloring is somewhat active, right? By coloring the word and by coloring the structure that the word is the name of, it activates your learning. At least the idea is that it activates your learning. Active learning, let me just get on a soapbox for a minute. Active learning strategies, things like writing, talking, coloring, quizzing yourself, maybe using flashcards, questioning someone else and then having that person question you. Those are active things. Reading is somewhat passive. Going over your notes is passive. Passive learning can work for some, but my experience is that whenever you can activate your learning by writing things out. So for example, if you're trying to memorize a list of steps, GPCR activation, just write it out and then check your list against the answer key somewhere in your notes and realize, oh, I forgot to mention, GDP dissociation. And then do it again until you have that memorized in your head by having written it out. Writing it is a much better way to learn things like that. And I'll be honest, there is some element of memorization. Anatomy, for sure, is a lot of memorization, and physiology requires some memorization. But then you have to take that memorized information and learn it, how to use it. What does it actually mean? It's a challenge. In any case, the coloring assignments, which are also in the schedule, are designed to help you learn the anatomy. So you'll see as we go along, how the coloring book helps you out. Anything else in the syllabus that I want to go over? Well, let me just finish this up by saying, please read the syllabus, as carefully as you can. And if you have any questions about it, bring it to class next week, or bring it to me, or send me an email. What do you mean when you say such and such? Can you clarify that? I'd be happy to clarify. So here's the information in the syllabus, right? That's what we've just been doing, is reviewing the syllabus. At the break, so typically this class, it meets for an hour and a half, 80 minutes, from 8:30 to 9:50, and I almost always will take a break somewhere around the middle of the class. So get up and stretch, go to the bathroom, shake your head, whatever. At the break today, I would like you to work on the handout, the course goals handout. That is to say, it's useful at the beginning of course to evaluate. What are you here for? What are your goals? from getting this class, from taking this class. And then there's some other things on that course. I will not be collecting this. What I'm suggesting is that you do this and put it at the front of your binder and review it every once in a while over the course of the semester and say, am I meeting my own goals for this course? Am I getting what I looked forward to at the beginning of the class before the workload got heavy? Are the things that I was nervous about at the beginning of the class, did they turn out to be, oh, that wasn't a big deal? I'm hoping that will be true, but if not, we'll figure it out. So, answering your questions here at the beginning of this class where everything is fresh and new. What do you want to do? What are your goals? What are you looking forward to? What are you, not so much looking forward to? And then I'm going to ask you to reflect on your the best course you ever had, whether it was in grade school or high school or college, and the worst course you ever had in high school or college, and just reflect on what made it good. From the student perspective, what did the students do to make it good? What did the students do to make it not good, in the case of a not good course? What did the teacher do to make it good or not good? Then, over the course of the semester, go back to that and say, am I helping make this course as good as it can be? Obviously, the idea here is that a good course is a two-way street. It's not just me. It's you and me working together to make this course the best it can be, hopefully, for you and for the people around you. So think about whether the goal, think about whether if this course is falling short of what you would hope it would be, figure out whether that's something you can change or whether that's something I can change. And feel free to let me know. If you want to be anonymous, just slide a note under my office door some evening. I'll see you in the morning. And the same with the worst course. If there's something, if you think that I'm doing something that's taking this course in the direction of towards the worst course you ever took, let me know. If there's something that the students are doing that is taking this toward other students perhaps that are taking this course in a bad direction, and you think I can help steer that, let me know. Anonymously if necessary or not. I don't, whatever. I'm happy to get feedback during the semester. And of course we'll do the course evals at the end. So I'll ask you to do this goals sheet at the break or as homework because I think it'll have value for the whole semester. And then keep it hold on to it, refer to it. Okay, so let's talk about lab. So the anatomy lab is the highlight of this class. I mean, it's an incredible experience. It's something that not very many college students get. It's something that not very many college students at a school as small as Earlham get. And so you're gonna have a pretty unique experience. And I want to make it the most positive experience it can be. When I first came here, I was not trained as an anatomist, and I wasn't sure how this was going to go. And it didn't take me very long to realize, if you're going to learn anatomy, human anatomy, doing it on a human body just makes it so much deeper, richer, three-dimensional experience than learning from pictures or even from models or from animals, cats or little pigs or something. Some of you may have done some dissection before. I mean, those of you who took A&P 2 certainly have done dissection before. The experience is intense, the learning is amazing, and so it is a rich educational experience. And so I hope that you'll all enjoy it. Some people will dive right in, so to speak, with enthusiasm, and some are going to be a little bit more reserved and, I think I'll just watch. And that's okay. There's room for all that kind of behavior. I'm hoping that people who say, I think I'll just watch, will eventually be able to get in there and work with the gung-ho students. You can see this is a big class. This is bigger than most of the A&P ones that I've ever taught. That was partially a fluke because, remember at the beginning of the enrollment period back in the fall, there was that stutter where the system didn't open, and then it did open, and then the course filled, and students who said, wait a second, I tried to get on at 7 o'clock and I couldn't, and then I came back at 7:30 and it was filled, what's up with that? Well, that was part of the reason why I just said, okay, so I let pretty much everybody in. So it's a big class, and as a result, we're going to split the lab into three 2-hour sections. There's going to be a Tuesday 1 to 3 section, a Tuesday 3 to 5 section, and a Thursday 7 to 9 p.m. section. So some of you can take, some of you have a choice, and some of you have no choice, because of other courses. Those of you who are taking Econal may or may not have a choice. So, but the way we're going to partition into these lab sections is by running a lottery. I think I emailed you back in the fall, and I just posted something on Moodle about this. We will run a lottery. So your name, I'll run a list randomizer, and the first person on the list, whoever that is, it's going to be a random assignment. The first person will get to choose which section they're in. And then the second person, and the third person, and the fourth person, all the way down until the end of the class. And hopefully, everybody will get into a section that works for them. If you're at the bottom of the list, you got a terrible placement on the lottery, and the only position left in the class is something you cannot take, then we start to negotiate trades. I say, okay, would somebody in this section who prefers to be here but could be here switch with this person? Because if nobody switches, this person can't take the course. And because Earlham students are really helpful to each other, I've never had an experience where everybody wasn't placed into a suitable lab section. This system has always worked. So I'm optimistic that it will work again this year, even with a big class, because of the 3 sections. The Thursday evening section hopefully opens up options for a lot of people. So the lab is a 2-hour lab. Approximately 1 hour of the lab will be spent with the cadaver, and 1 hour will be spent with a computer program called AMP Revealed that is photographs of a cadaver at various stages of a dissection that are idealized, right? They've been professionally dissected, and so the computer program helps to identify certain structures that in the real cadaver might have been hard to see because our own dissections were not as perfect as the professionally done dissections. Unfortunately, it's a photographs of a real cadaver. It's not a cartoon, but it is not 3D rotatable. It's still shots. So what that means is that sometimes the 3-dimensionality is lost. You can see it from the front or you can see it from the back, but you can't rotate the photograph in this program. There are other programs, and you can probably download to your phone some anatomy and physiology apps that are even more powerful than the ones we'll be using in class. No, but that's your dime. That's biology can't be buying everybody apps. So you will be joining what used to be a brotherhood and is now a more inclusive community of people who have done anatomy in a cadaver lab. Right? This is a very famous painting by Rembrandt of a cadaver lab. And so I don't look like this and you don't look like this, but we are joining this community of people who have learned anatomy from a human cadaver. And so this goes back, 400 years, almost. And I don't know, I think you should feel there should be something, intrinsically satisfying about joining a group of learners who have been doing something like this for over 400 years. Questions about the course? Because I'm now going to transition into some content, a review of key things from cell physiology. Any questions about the course? Yes?
Not about the course specifically, but about Tips for Success. Have you ever got a suggestion from a student about like an app that we can download that helps with?
I have never gotten a suggestion like that, so I can't give you advice about an app. In fact, I started looking through some of the anatomy apps, and some of them are free, and some of them cost $25. And I do believe that you get what you pay for. But I have not yet invested the $25 in the $25 app, so I can't give you good advice about that. Oh, before I go on, let me comment. So there's the syllabus, which we've talked about. There is the course schedule, this grid. The course schedule includes the topic, the reading assignment from the physiology book, the coloring assignment from the coloring book. So these are your homework assignments. I'm not going to remind you of these homework assignments. It's on the schedule. This is your homework assignment, really for the whole semester. You'll see that today there is no lab, right? There's no lab at 7 o'clock p.m. today. Nobody come to lab today. On Tuesday, next Tuesday, we'll run the live at 1 o'clock. If you can't come on Tuesday at 1 o'clock because of a course conflict, maybe Econal or something else, you'll send me your information by email. I will be your proxy at this lab section. So if you email me and say, I can't be in the 1 o'clock section on Tuesday, I can't be in the 3 o'clock section on Tuesday because of Econal lab, I must be in the Thursday evening section, that's what I need to know. Or if you say, I can't be in the 1 o'clock section, or no, I could be in the 1 o'clock section on Tuesday, but I can't be in the 3 o'clock section because of some other Tuesday, Friday, 2:30 class, let me know. And then I know, okay, you could either be in the 1 to 3 section or in the Thursday evening section. So let me know what your parameters are, and I will be your proxy when it comes time to putting you in a section. But you have to let me know, otherwise I don't know what the conflict is. And you'll see when problem sets are due. So for example, the first problem set is due on Sunday, January 27th, and I will make the problem set available to you with plenty of time ahead of, a week or more to do the problem set. Let's see, any other things to talk about? Oh, those of you who are taking Econal, how many of you are taking Econal? Let me see, that's what I was afraid. So it turns out, and this is not by design, but it is true, that the Econal exams and the A&P exams are very closely aligned in schedule. So what that means is that both Corinne and I are going to be somewhat flexible for a day, in terms of what day you take the A&P or the Econal exam. But it's only a question of days. I mean, you're going to have an Econal exam and an A&P exam within a few days of each other, no matter what. It's going to happen 3 times over the course of the semester. So what I'm doing is giving you a heads up, and don't wait till the last minute. If you're in Econal, I mean, this is true for everybody, but if you're in Econal, this is especially true. Do not wait until the last minute to start studying for these tests, because they're going to be on top of each other, and you'll want to spread out your preparation. Okay. Yes?
Do you bring your the coloring book to class, or is that for
You may bring in the coloring book to class, it's not required. And same with the physiology textbook, they're not required in class. Those are homework, that's homework. Other questions? Yes?
Are we turning in the coloring book?
You are not turning in the coloring book. I'm not going to check how, your color scheme or how well you stay within the lines or anything like that. This is for your learning. I will quiz you on information from the coloring book. Those will be in the quizzes and in the exams. But I will not evaluate your coloring. Yes?
the problem set I found out from Miller also exists to this.
The problem sets, I will have a hard copy here a week or so ahead of time, and they will be posted as a PDF to Moodle. Actually, this is in the past I've run into trouble where I've posted Word files, and then there's been a few students who don't have Word on their computer, and they can fix it. They can go to you know, a CST computer and then download it as something that they can't get access to. Is there anybody here? But so my temptation, especially for problem sets, is to upload it as a Word file, because then you can work on it as a Word file. Is there any? But I can also upload it as a PDF, which then you have to transform into something else. Is there anybody here who does not have Word? Okay. So I will make sure that both versions, a PDF and a Word version, are available on. Okay. Any other questions? Well, if something occurs to you, please don't hesitate to bring it up either in an email to me privately or to, you know, in class on Tuesday. Remember, Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock is our lab lottery. The lab, oh, by the way, we can't all fit in the lab at the same time. So the lab on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, Tuesday the 22nd, we will start in Stanley 044. So, and I'll put a note on the lab door in case you go to the lab instead. But we'll start in Stanley 044, do the lottery, figure out who's in what section, and then we'll go up to the AMP lab for an introduction. So on Tuesday, those of you who can make it will get introduced to the cadaver lab and to the computer program, just as sort of an orientation session. We won't work, but we will get oriented. Okay? I've been jumping around. I apologize for that. I tried to be linear, but I didn't succeed very well. So if you have questions, please let me know. Okay, so anatomy and physiology builds on the foundation of cell physiology that you all had either just last semester or in previous semesters. And so some of your job right now, starting right now, is to review and refresh and relearn some of the key concepts from cell physiology. There are things that I'm going to go through real fast, like G proteins. I'm going to go through that fast because you struggled with that once before and you'll struggle with it again. But there are things that so the things that I feel like are from cell phys, I'll go top speed, and the things that are new, I'll slow down and try to, go into more detail. Your job is to slow me down as necessary. Right? To say, wait, what was that? That went by too fast. Feel free to ask me a question. I welcome you slowing me down. So here are some of the key concepts from cell physiology, right? Ionic distribution, solute transport mechanisms, receptors and G proteins, membrane potentials, action centers, synaptic potentials. These are key because, after all, we're in the nervous system now. We're going to get deep into the nervous system, and the basic knowledge that you got from cell phys about neurophysiology, we're going to be building on. So let's start building on it. You'll remember that there are 4 general mechanisms for solute transport. And I'll be honest, the solutes that we're talking about in AMP1 are going to be almost all ions. Those are the solutes we're going to focus on. Glucose a little bit, but ions like sodium and potassium and chloride and calcium are going to be the solutes that we've got to keep track of. You'll remember that there are active transport proteins that convert the energy from something else into a ion gradient. So remember the sodium-potassium ATPase that converts the energy from ATP into a sodium and potassium gradients. Calcium ATPases are another class of active transporters that build calcium gradients. But you'll also remember that there are secondary active transporters that use the gradient that was established by an ATPase and convert that gradient into a different ion gradient. So for example, we'll get into this in a few minutes. There is a sodium-calcium exchanger that will use the energy of the sodium gradient that was built by the sodium-potassium ATP ACE to make a calcium gradient. So you'll see this in a minute. Those are all active transports because they are building an ion gradient from the energy either in ATP or in another ion gradient. And then those gradients, once established by a active transport process, and then passive transport can follow. So the passive transport that we will mostly be looking at in this class, especially in the first few weeks, are ion channels. Now remember, ion channels are not active transporters. The ions that flow through a channel are just flowing down their concentration gradient. The ions that flow, that really are pumped by an active transporter, are being pumped up their concentration gradient, making or maintaining that concentration gradient. And the channels are using that for some other purpose, usually for electrical signaling. Okay, so you'll see these two. We will not be talking about transporter-mediated passive transport very much. It's important for nutrition of nerve cells, the glucose uniporter. I'm getting ahead of myself. We won't be talking about that very much. And, in fact, we will not be talking very much about simple diffusion because ions don't do this. So really, in this course, which is not the same as AMP2 and is not the same as cell physiology, these are the two forms of solute ion transport that we need to focus on. Active transport, making gradients, and channel-mediated transport or flow using that gradient. So okay, so you know the drill here. You got your shiny new clicker. What we're going to do, we're going to follow the pattern that we set up in cell physiology this year, which is not the same as the pattern in AMP. So please fold up your shiny new clicker, and at the end of class, please leave your shiny new clicker, won't be shiny and new anymore, on the table. And I'll bring them to class each day. You don't have to hold on to them. You can just leave them here with me, and I will keep track of them. Okay? So let's do this clicker. This is based on cell physiology level knowledge. What is or are the main differences between simple diffusion, which is not a main thing for this course, and channel-mediated passive transport, which is? I'll let you read this, and then before you choose your answers, I'll go back to the previous slide. Actually, I don't need to go back to the previous slide because the previous slide is in your handout, so you can refer to it. Okay, please show me. So obviously this is not great, but I don't have photographic memory. But I do like to see how, in this case, I'm seeing how well you remember stuff from cell phase. In some cases, I'm testing how much you're retaining from what I just taught, because that helps me realize, oh, they didn't get it, or yes, they got it all, I can move on. It helps. The goal of these clickers is not so much, it's not an assessment, it's to establish a conversation about what I have considered pretty core concepts so that we can clarify things. So, show me your answers, please. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of correct answers, at least partially correct answers. Those of you who chose one letter, I'm going to let you try again and choose 2. Okay, so the best answers are B and T. Let's go through this, because most of you got it right, and so typically when most of you get it right, I'll just move on because I don't need to go through it, but let's go through this quickly. The first one is wrong because both simple diffusion and channel-mediated diffusion require gradient. In simple diffusion, the solute contacts lipid, but in channel-mediated transport, the solute contacts protein. Yeah, that's what's shown here versus here. It's in the cartoon. The solute in a channel, I'm sorry, here's the channel. The solute is going through, is contacting protein, not lipid. Okay. Most small solutes can be transported by simple diffusion. Right there, that's a wrong statement. So that's what made rendered C a wrong statement. Ions do not do simple diffusion because they don't like to. It's energetically unfavorable for them to be in contact with lipids. And this is a true statement because channels undergo conformational changes from closed to open to inactivated. That's what rendered this statement true. Channels do undergo protein conformational changes. But simple diffusion doesn't require protein, so it certainly doesn't require protein conformational changes. Okay, so let's do another one. Some of you may have seen the answer to this. What are similarities between channel-mediated transport and transporter-mediated passive transport? So this is, I'm asking you to review the difference between this and this mechanism. Remembering the difference between channels and uniporters from cell-phase. Most of you are getting it all right. This is in all of the above. So rather than, since most of you got this right, rather than go through it, are there any questions? The point here is to establish a conversation. And just because most of you got it right doesn't mean there aren't things worth talking about. Are there any, and this is my standard operating procedure here, is to use these to answer questions. If many of you didn't get it right, I'll say you've got to have questions because a lot of you didn't get it all right. Are there any questions about this concept?
How does the channel and uniporter complication differ?
How do they differ? That's a really good question. Let's go back to cartoon. Channels undergo conformational changes from a closed to an open conformation. When the channel is open, ions flow. When the channel is closed, ions don't flow. When the channel is open, hundreds of ions can flow per millisecond. So flow is very fast. A transporter undergoes a more complex conformational change. Open to one side, the ion binds, conformational change, open to the other side, the ion unbinds. For each individual ion transport, there is conformational changes. One side, then the other side, one side, then the other side, one side, then the other side. At no point is it a channel that allows ions to just flow because it's open. It's always closed on one side or the other and binding on the other side. And so binding, unbinding, binding, unbinding, binding, unbinding, individually. That's the difference. Here it's closed, open, and now thousands of ions flow.
These are always the
A channel?
same.
Always. I'm always careful I'm careful about saying never, and I'm careful about saying always. It is usually doing the cycle that I talked about. Okay? So we will be, this isn't just to review cell physiology. We're going to be using this when we need to understand membrane potentials and action potentials, which are really some of the core functional properties of neurons coming up pretty soon. Let's do this one. Primary and secondary active transporters. Remember, let me just unpack that a little bit. Primary active transporters are the active transporters that hydrolyze ATP. Secondary active transporters are the transporters that use one solute gradient to create or build or maintain another solute gradient. That's the difference between primary and secondary. So now I've given you some of the answers, that's fine, but go ahead and do this as a clicker. And then I think we'll hit click. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of at least partially correct answers. I think both B and D are correct. Katie?
Well, so, but, you know, you mentioned, I think in self-phys, right, that enzymes don't make reactions spontaneous if they weren't before, right?
That's true.
And these aren't really spontaneous things. So you're going against the gradient, right? So technically it wouldn't be an enzyme.
Creating the gradient is spontaneous if there is energy conversion.
Okay, so you're including that as part of.
Oh yeah, that's part of the reaction. So you're absolutely right. Building the gradient is endergonic. Hydrolyzing ATP is exergonic by itself. Overall, the reaction is exergonic and spontaneous under the conditions, under the standard conditions.
Okay.
Kendra? Sodium
potassium
Uh-huh.
is primary.
Yes, it is. Sodium potassium ATPase is sort of the archetypal primary active transporter.
Okay, so can you explain why the
Yeah. The sodium glucose co-transporter?
Yeah, why is it, there's one that also hydrolyzes ATP, but it's not primary.
I'm not sure I know which one you're talking about.
I think it's the one that's in sometimes, it's like glucose and
Okay, so there's a sodium glucose co-transporter, which is an active transporter, but it is not a primary active transporter because it does not hydrolyze ATP. It's active because it uses the sodium gradient to pump glucose. we won't be talking about that one in this course very much. This is kind of a semantic statement. I won't test you on this. But the fact is that transporters are lowering an energy barrier, and all right there, they are acting like an enzyme. Some enzymologists would say, "Oh, that's not an enzyme. You have to have a product. You have to have a substrate." Well, I could say, yeah, there's a substrate. We've got ions on one side. That's the substrate. We've got ions on the other side. That's the product. What are you asking me for? And so we could, an enzymologist and a channelologist and I could have a debate about whether these are enzymes or not, and we don't have to do that. Go ahead.
For C, if you were to say that there is energy, would you consider the statement correct?
Yes.
Because
Yeah, if in the presence of energy input, this is a true statement.
because my understanding of it is that if it requires energy, it neglects the spontaneity. It's not spontaneous if it requires energy.
I see the semantics, the issue here, and I think this is the same thing that Aiden was bringing up.
Yeah.
The overall reaction requires ATP in the case of the sodium potassium ATPase. That is the reaction. That's the energy input that makes the overall reaction spontaneous.
I'm still just a little bit confused how primary and secondary are different other than ATP. If they both create concentration gradients, and how is secondary different?
So the only difference is that in a primary active transporter, the source of energy is ATP directly. It hydrolyzes, the protein hydrolyzes ATP and converts that energy into conformational changes that pump ions. In secondary, the source of energy is another ion gradient. You'll see, let me come back to that after the break. You'll see, because we're going to use that concept in two different contexts that are very important for neurophysiology after the break. So let me just see where I am here. Yeah, so we're going to be mostly talking about ions, which do not undergo simple diffusion. That's a concept that you already are familiar with. So let's take a break, a 5-minute break. This will be fairly standard. We'll take a break. You can, you can work on your homework assignment, that is to say the goals, the goals handout, or just take a break, and we'll come back in 5 minutes.
We're done.
Before we get started, or before we continue, let me, as long as we're interrupted, let me make a few more announcements. One is, you may notice Opie back here in the back of the room, video recording this class. So classes are going to be video recorded, and Opie is going to create a YouTube channel, and I will provide for you the link on Moodle to the YouTube channel. So each class will have a video. That means that it's a resource for you to use for review of class. If you miss something and you want to, what did Bob say about this slide? You can fast forward through it. You can watch the thing at 2 speed and watch me, talk like a chipmunk. It's a resource especially for preparation for exams. Now, obviously, you know that if a video recording is being made, am I, Bob, saying that attendance in class is optional? No, I'm not saying that. I think that you learn better if you are in a room with other students, that the face-to-face, the physical contact has value, that watching a lecture on a screen doesn't. But if for some reason you miss class, there is the backup of the video. When you're preparing for exams or quizzes, there is the video. Nina.
Will you also be posting PowerPoints?
Oh yeah, I will, yes, definitely. So this PowerPoint will be up immediately after class. I will always post the PowerPoints after class because the answers to the clickers are embedded in the PowerPoint, and I don't want to give those to you before class, because then the whole purpose of the clicker is lost.
I was looking through your schedule and it says Brain Explorers for 3:30,
Ah,
but
Thank
that's
you.
on a Saturday.
thank you very much. It is a Saturday. Okay, so let's talk about Brain Explorers. So every year, the Society for Neuroscience, a huge scientific society, sponsors something called Brain Awareness Week, where neuroscientists all around the world have outreach events to the public to make them aware of neuroscience, of neurological diseases and disorders, and so some of the activities are for kids and some of them are for college students and for everywhere in between. Brain Explorers is the Earlham College entry into Brain Explorers, into Brain Awareness Week, even though it doesn't actually happen to fall on Brain Awareness Week because our spring break is when Brain Awareness Week is often. Students, including some of you, will prepare stations, activity stations. It's held in the Joseph Moore Museum. The public is invited. It's already in the spring events calendar. And so what we will do is pretty soon, in the next couple of weeks, we will, students who would like to do an outreach to the public about the brain, about neuroscience, we'll start to arrange some sort of public outreach thing, maybe related to memory. Some of the things that have been done in the past were, memory tests, pain, thresholds, optical illusions, Play-Doh models of the brain. What are some others? Some basic some electrophysiological recordings using an iPhone app for. It's pretty cool. So things related to neuroscience will be part of Brain Awareness Week. It's a Saturday event, and just to be clear, this is the one extra credit opportunity in this course. I don't offer a lot of extra credits, as most of you already know, but this one is there and it is available to you. You'll get extra credit for going and participating in all the stations that are there, and you'll get extra credit for preparing a station. Not both, obviously, but extra credit. How much? I don't know yet. I have to figure that out.
Do you know, I know it's like kind of in advance, but do you know like how long it'll run for?
Do I know how long it will run? It's like 1 to 5,
Okay.
1 to 4, something like that.
Okay.
So for people who are preparing a station, it's like noon to 5, right? Noon to 12:30 to set up, and then the public comes, and it's really fun. I mean, kids get into this stuff, and college students, depending on how Peter and Lindsay feel in CGI students might get extra credit for coming and participating, in which case the attendance goes through the roof, at least for a little while. So, anyway, that's what Brain Explorers is. That's coming up at the end of March. So by the end of January, we'll start to be talking about who's interested in preparing one of these things and, start to set it up. Thank you for raising that question. As long as we're interrupted here in the flow, I would like to say that I have your final exams from AMP2 or from CalPhys. If you want your final exam from the fall semester, I'm happy to give it to you. If you don't want it, just don't pick it up at the end of class and it will get recycled. Okay? Okay. Any questions? So that's your option. I didn't want to recycle your work without your permission, but I'm now, if you don't pick it up, that is tantamount to you giving me permission to recycle it. Okay? And by recycle, I mean shred it. Any more questions about the course, about the schedule, about shredding? Okay. So the sodium potassium ATP, this is a figure from your textbook. The sodium potassium ATPase uses the energy in ATP, hydrolyzes ATP to ADP, pumping 3 sodiums out and 2 potassiums in to the cell per ATP. In the presence of ATP, this overall reaction is spontaneous and exergonic. The pumping of sodium out and the pumping of potassium in builds gradients. So the sodium concentration outside cells is higher than inside the cells. The potassium concentration is potassium is pumped in, so the potassium concentration is higher on the inside than on the outside. What do you need to know? You need to know that the sodium potassium ATPase pumps sodium out and pumps potassium in. I don't care that you memorize the 3:2 ratio. That's not a key concept. And I don't really care that you memorize the numbers here. That's not worth your brain space. You don't have to memorize 150 millimolar. But you do have to memorize this order of magnitude. It's not molar. It's not micromolar. It's in the order of 100 or so millimolar, okay? So don't worry about 150 versus 145 versus 155. Those are all correct answers. But know that it's in the hundreds-ish range. And similarly, know these to the order of magnitude. Millimolar, 10 to 20 millimolar sodium, 150 to 140 to 160 millimolar potassium. As long as you know that it's in the hundreds-ish range, you'll be good for everything you need to do. If you need to know an exact number for a calculation, which is going to come up on the first problem set, I will give you the number you need. So sodium concentration is high on the outside, low on the inside. Potassium concentration is high on the inside, low on the outside. The sodium potassium ATPase is working very hard all the time to maintain those gradients. And so even when sodium channels allow sodium to flow in, which we'll get to next week, the pump is maintaining the gradient. The channels do not disturb the gradient to any appreciable extent. The gradient is highly stable, as long as there's ATP. If the person stops breathing, and there's no more ATP because there's no more oxidative phosphorylation, then obviously things change. That's called death. So here is a cartoon, a series of cartoons about the sodium potassium ATPs. Lipid, protein, in a cartoon version. Obviously, there is structural information that is lost here. There are alpha helices, there are beta sheets, there are atomic contacts. Those of you, you all did a protein structure paper where you got into some of the molecular details. Some of you may have even done a structure paper on the sodium potassium ATPase. This is just a cartoon. So every time I show you an arrow, that arrow can be translated into a word or a couple of words. So what is the word? So here are 3 sodium ions. So here's the intracellular solution. Here are 3 sodium ions. Arrow, the 3 sodium ions are now here. What does that, there are 2 words in that are embedded in this arrow. What's one of them?
Binding.
Binding is one of them. What's the other one?
Conformational change.
We're not seeing conformational change in this arrow. Flow is not exactly the right answer, but it's close. Diffusion, right? These ions are bouncing around. They're diffusing in the solution. They are diffusing and binding. Diffusion is something that is often underrepresented in physiology, but it's really pretty important. Ions they're bouncing around, they're diffusing, and eventually they find empty binding sites and bind. Those are the concepts that are embedded in this arrow. ATP was already bound. Okay, what is embedded in this arrow? Look at this figure, look at this figure. What is the word that is embedded in this arrow? Aiden?
I think there's sort of two, right? You have hydrolyzing and phosphorylation, right?
Okay, I'll buy that too. Hydrolysis of ATP and phosphorylation of the ATPase. Okay, you jumped the gun. What's the next arrow? Conformational change, right? We don't see, okay, there's a little, yes, you're right, there is conformational change, okay? So you noticed something that I was actually missing there. So in this arrow, there is hydrolysis of ATP, phosphorylation of the protein, and a small conformational change. What is embedded in this arrow is a large conformational change, right? So now this upward dome-shaped thing, the protein, is now undergoes a large conformational change. And what is that's what's in this arrow, conformational change. And what is embedded in this arrow? Two words. Unbinding or dissociation and diffusion. Okay? So that's what happens here. Now we're going to, I guess this one here, 4. So now we have 2 potassium ions on the outside. Okay. Binding and diffusion. Binding to binding sites. What is embedded in, what is happening here? Dephosphorylation is a good answer. Unbinding of the phosphate would be an acceptable answer. The protein is becoming dephosphorylated. The phosphate that was attached here is becoming detached here. That's dephosphorylation. What is happening? Let me go over to this side. So now, what is embedded in this arrow? Conformational change. Unbinding and diffusion. Binding of ATP. In fact, it's the binding of ATP that triggers this conformational change and this unbinding and diffusion. So it is the hydrolysis of ATP that causes this conformational change, and it is the binding of ATP that causes this conformational change. And this is the sequence of events of binding, diffusion, binding, hydrolysis, and conformational changes that give the sodium-potassium ATPase its ability to pump sodium out, right? Sodium is being moved from from in to out, and potassium is being moved from out to in. These are the steps of the protein, of the sodium-potassium ATPase. So now what I want to do is use this knowledge to cartoon something else. What's that? The cell. That's the world's worst cartoon of a neuron. Okay. Yeah, it's a cell. that?
Sodium, potassium.
The sodium, potassium, ATPs, the sodium pump. Where is sodium high? Outside. Where is potassium high? Inside. This is the sort of thing that should become real natural to you. What do we call this protein? A calcium ATPase. It in fact has a specialized name called the plasma membrane calcium ATPase. It's in the surface membrane, plasma membrane. So the name is plasma membrane calcium ATPase, and it pumps calcium out. So where is the calcium concentration higher? Outside a cell. The calcium concentration outside cells is on the order of 1 to 2 millimolar. And the calcium concentration on the inside of cells is on the order of 0.1 micromolar. Micromolar. I changed units, right? So this is 0.0001 millimolar. So this is a very small number, this is a relatively small number, but this gradient is not small, it's a steep gradient. The plasma membrane calcium ATPase helps establish this calcium gradient. Okay, this is the world's worst cartoon of an endoplasmic reticulum. So this is an ER membrane. If I were to cartoon a mitochondria, it would look something like this. That would be the world's worst cartoon of a mitochondria. What do we call this protein? This one. Is it a calcium ATPase?
Yes.
Yes, it is a calcium ATPase. Is it in the plasma membrane? No. So it's got a different name. It's got a name called sarcoplasmic, because sometimes it's in muscle. Endoplasmic, because that's what we're talking about in neurons. Endoplasmic reticulum. Sarcoplasmic endoplasmic reticulum. Calcium ATPase. SERCA is the name of this calcium ATPase. Where is the calcium concentration low? Well, it's low. It's still 0.1 micromolar out here. In here, inside the endoplasmic reticulum, it can be on the order of 10 millimolar. The endoplasmic reticulum that you learned about for the same endoplasmic reticulum that you learned about for protein translation is also a calcium store. Okay. Question? What is that protein? The black one that I just asked.
Sodium,
the sodium calcium exchanger, antipode. They call it an exchanger. The sodium calcium exchanger. What is the source of energy of the sodium calcium exchanger?
The energy,
The sodium
gradient
gradient.
created by
By the sodium potassium ATPase. The sodium is flowing down its concentration gradient, and calcium is being pumped up its concentration gradient. So this protein is an important player. These are the three important proteins for creating and maintaining this very, very steep calcium gradient. We're going to be using this in fact, you'll be using this in the problem set next week. Okay, I'm going to do one more. I'm going to do one more of these. In fact, I'm going to do it over here, and then I think we'll call it a day.
Could you repeat one more time what CIRCA was?
CIRCA is the sarcoplasmic endoplasmic calcium reticulum, calcium ATPase. It's an ATPase in the SR or ER membrane, not in the plasma membrane. And it pumps calcium from cytoplasm into the lumen of the endoplasmic reticulum.
What's the A stand for?
ATPase. So let me. What is this a cartoon of? The world's worst drawing of a presynaptic terminal. So I didn't give you any hints there. I suppose I could have, if I had drawn there like that, you might have known, oh, that's a presynaptic terminal because those are synaptic vesicles. Okay? I'm going to take one of those synaptic vesicles and blow it up to hugely out of proportion. So this is a synaptic vesicle. What would we call this protein?
Symporter.
A symporter, a co-transporter, a sodium neurotransmitter co-transporter. What is the source of energy for this co-transporter? The sodium gradient. So what do you know has to be here that I'm just not showing? The sodium potassium ATPase is what built that sodium gradient, and that is being used here to pump neurotransmitter from the synapse. We're going to talk more about this, but I'm just introducing the concept here. From the synapse into the cytosol of the presynaptic terminal. The concept here is a sodium neurotransmitter co-transporter using the sodium gradient built by the sodium potassium ATPase that is not shown here. Just keep it simple. Two more proteins and then we're done. What do we call that protein? A proton pump. Where are the protons higher in concentration? Inside the synaptic vesicle. Where is the pH high in this cartoon. In the cytoplasm, remember pH is the negative log of the concentration. Don't let pH confuse you. This is a low pH environment, and this is a neutral-ish pH environment. Okay, one more protein. And remember that we have this proton gradient. What do we call this protein? It's an antiporter. It's an exchanger. It's a proton neurotransmitter exchanger. Neurotransmitter is getting pumped into the synaptic vesicles. The energy for that pumping of neurotransmitter is coming from the proton gradient that came from the proton ATPase. Okay, so I've gone a little over. I apologize. I won't do that very often. Those are the key concepts from CalPhys that we will need for A&P. Use it. Remember to do some homework over the weekend. Review read the A&P textbook. Read the syllabus. Do your course goals if you haven't already. And I'll see you on Tuesday.